Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of construction costs.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some research here that suggests it's not just, the usual suspects like lumber shortages or labor costs anymore.
Right.
We're talking about global events, political tensions, things that seem completely unrelated, but actually have a massive impact on building projects, like right here in our own communities.
Yeah, you might be surprised to learn just how connected the price of that new office complex downtown is with, let's say, a trade dispute on the other side of the world.
I think a lot of people would assume that construction costs are mostly driven by local factors, myself included.
Yeah.
But we're talking about wars, passions. It's almost like these events send out a ripple effect that impacts building projects everywhere.
Exactly, yeah. Think about the ongoing tensions in Eastern Europe, for example.
Okay, yeah,
That conflict, it's really sent shockwaves through global supply chains, really disrupted the flow of crucial construction materials, things like steel and cement.
hmm
And, basic economics, when supply goes down, prices shoot up. We're seeing steel prices increase by almost 15% in some regions, and that's directly because of that conflict.
Wow, 15%, that's a huge jump. And I'm guessing it's not just limited to Eastern Europe, right? I mean, these disruptions, they can kind of cascade through these global markets.
Absolutely. For instance, take the Asia-Pacific region.
Okay,
We're seeing trade disputes escalate there, impacting the availability and cost of some key building components. I'm talking about things like electronics and that specialized manufacturing equipment. They might not be the bricks and mortar,
right.
but they're essential for modern construction.
So it's like this intricate web of global connections where a conflict in one region can trigger a chain reaction that ultimately affects the cost of building a hospital or a school, thousands of miles away.
Precisely. And it's not just about those physical disruptions to supply chains either.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, global markets are super sensitive to any geopolitical uncertainty. When investors see conflicts or trade wars brewing, they get nervous. And that can lead to those really wild swings in the prices of essential commodities.
So it's almost like a psychological effect as well. Like the fear of instability actually translates into real-world price fluctuations. But how does that actually play out in the construction industry?
Let's say you're a construction firm and you're trying to put together a budget for a large-scale infrastructure project. You've got your estimates for steel, concrete, lumber, all the basics, right?
Right, right.
And then suddenly, a major trade dispute erupts between two of the world's largest economies. The price of steel, which is very much influenced by global demand and production, jumps up by 20% in a matter of weeks.
Oh, man, that's like a nightmare scenario for any project manager trying to keep a project on track and within budget.
Oh, it is. And it really underscores the fact that construction costs, they're not just about those local factors anymore. They're deeply intertwined with those global events and just that overall market sentiment.
Okay, so we've got conflict zones, disrupting supply chains, investor jitters, causing price volatility. And then on top of all that, there's that whole issue of trade sanctions and tariffs.
Yeah.
I know these are often used as political tools, but how do they directly impact the construction industry?
So think about it this way. Sanctions are basically economic penalties, right?
Mm,
They get imposed on a country to, kind of pressure them into changing their behavior. But those penalties can have unintended consequences for industries that rely on global trade.
okay.
Let's say a country is super reliant on importing a specific type of lumber, and they're importing it from a nation that's just been hit with sanctions.
So they're suddenly cut off from their usual source of affordable material.
Exactly. And then they're forced to scramble, try to find other suppliers, which often means paying a premium to get what they need.
Yeah.
We saw this happen recently when tariffs were imposed on some types of steel imports.
Okay.
Domestic producers, they raised their prices because they knew builders had fewer options.
So it's not just about the countries directly involved in the conflict or a trade dispute, but it's about those ripple effects, right, that spread throughout the global economy and end up impacting the cost of doing business everywhere.
That's the key point here. We're calling this phenomenon war trades.
War trades, okay.
It's basically how these modern conflicts, with their economic warfare tactics, have a direct impact on your local construction project.
War trades, that's a really powerful way to put it. So let's break that down a bit further. How do these war trades actually play out when we talk about the availability of materials?
All right, so picture this. A country heavily reliant on importing cement from a specific region.
Okay.
Suddenly, that region becomes a conflict zone. Now, maritime traffic is disrupted. Shipping routes get blocked, insurance premiums skyrocket, and even if you can find the cement, it becomes so expensive and risky to transport.
So it's almost like trying to get a package delivered in the middle of a blizzard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything slows down, costs more, and you're not even sure it'll arrive.
Perfect analogy. And that uncertainty, it can really cripple construction projects. I mean, if you can't guarantee when your materials are going to show up, you can't keep your construction schedules on track. And every delay just adds to the overall cost.
So we've got material shortages, transportation headaches, and then there's the big I word, inflation. How does that factor into this whole equation?
Think of it like dominoes.
Thank you.
Geopolitical instability, it fuels economic uncertainty. Investors, they get nervous. Demand rises for those safe haven assets, and currencies, they start fluctuating. All of this contributes to that inflationary pressure, which drives up the prices of just about everything. Raw materials, labor costs, everything.
It's just a vicious cycle where every problem seems to make the other problems even worse, and the construction industry is caught right in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And it just makes planning and budgeting for construction projects a real challenge. I mean, what might have been a totally viable project a year ago could suddenly be impossible because of these factors.
All right, so we've painted a pretty bleak picture here. What does all this mean for construction projects going forward? Are we headed for a standstill with sky-high costs and endless delays?
Not necessarily. The construction industry is pretty resilient, you know. There are ways to navigate these challenges, but we do have to acknowledge that things have changed.
Yeah,
The old ways of thinking, those assumptions about cost predictability and stable supply chains,
right.
yeah, those don't really apply anymore.
Okay, so what's the new playbook then? What can construction firms actually do to adapt and succeed in this new world?
Well, we're going to dig into those strategies a little bit later, but I can tell you this much. Staying informed is absolutely critical, and diversification is key. Embracing innovation, well, that's essential for survival.
Ooh, that's a good cliffhanger. We'll be back soon to unpack those strategies in more detail. But for now, let's pause here and let our listeners absorb this first part of our deep dive into the unexpected ways global events are shaping the world of construction. We'll be back soon with part 2.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about how these global events, from trade wars to armed conflicts, are really shaking things up in the construction industry. But, it's not all doom and gloom.
Yeah.
There are ways to adapt.
Right.
And that's what we're going to explore now.
Okay, awesome. So we've established that construction costs, they're not just about local market conditions anymore. It's a global game now with a whole new set of rules. So what are the strategies for winning this game? How do you succeed in this new world order?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, staying informed is crucial. Construction firms need to be aware of those potential disruptions, like before they hit.
Okay, so are we talking about having a whole team of geopolitical analysts on staff?
Well, it might not be a bad idea, but in all seriousness, there are resources out there to help track these developments, specialized trade publications, industry associations, even some really good social media accounts.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, those can give you those early warnings about potential conflicts, trade disputes, even natural disasters that could disrupt those supply chains.
So it's about being proactive, like anticipating those ripple effects before they turn into tsunamis.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Diversification is key. Relying on just one supplier for, a really important material, that's just asking for trouble in this environment.
Yeah, I can see how that could really backfire. One political shakeup, one natural disaster, and suddenly your whole project is just, dead in the water.
Exactly. Spreading that risk by working with multiple suppliers from different regions, it gives you options.
Right.
It's like having a backup generator for when the power goes out.
So instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, you're spreading them out across multiple baskets, hopefully in different parts of the world. But wouldn't that make managing those logistics incredibly complex?
We definitely adds a layer of complexity, yeah, but the benefits in terms of that stability and risk mitigation can outweigh the challenges. And, we have those software platforms and logistics companies that are specializing in managing those really intricate global supply chains now.
Oh, that makes sense. So we've got information, diversification. What about innovation? I mean, is there a way for the construction industry to become less reliant on those traditional materials, the ones that are subject to these crazy price swings?
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of interest in those alternative building materials, things that are sourced locally, produced sustainably, and, potentially less vulnerable to those global market fluctuations.
Like I've heard about bamboo being used in construction. Is that a viable alternative to, traditional lumber?
Yeah, bamboo is a great example. I mean, it grows incredibly fast, so it's a renewable resource, and it's actually stronger than a lot of hardwoods.
Huh.
And we're seeing more and more use of those recycled materials, too.
Okay.
Like plastics, even crushed glass. They're using those in all sorts of applications.
So the construction industry is starting to think outside the concrete box, huh?
Haha, you could say that.
What about, like, more radical innovations? We were talking about 3D printed concrete before. Is that something that's actually happening now?
Yeah, that 3D printing in construction is moving past that experimental phase, for sure.
Okay.
There are companies out there printing entire houses now. They use these specialized concrete mixtures that are quick drying and super strong.
Wow, that's amazing. Are there limitations to the technology?
It's still pretty new, and there are some regulations and hurdles to overcome, in a lot of places.
Right.
And the upfront cost, that investment in the equipment, it can be significant, which might be difficult for smaller firms.
So it's probably going to be adopted by those larger companies first and then trickle down as the technology gets, more affordable.
Right, exactly.
Interesting.
We're also seeing a lot of innovation in prefabricated and modular construction methods. Where they create the building components offsite in like controlled factory settings, and then they just transport them and assemble them on
So
location.
it's like building with giant Lego bricks.
Aha, exactly. And that offers a few advantages. It cuts down on labor costs, reduces waste, and because production happens in a controlled environment, you're less susceptible to those weather delays or material price fluctuations.
So it's about moving away from that traditional on-site construction to a more factory-based approach.
Yeah, you could put it that way.
Okay, that makes sense.
And it has the potential to make those construction projects, more efficient, predictable, and ultimately more resilient to those global disruptions.
So we've got information, we've got diversification and innovation. But even with all those strategies, it seems like the construction industry can't really solve this global puzzle all on its own, right?
You're absolutely right. This really needs to be a team effort. Policymakers, industry groups, financial institutions, they all need to be involved to create a more stable and supportive environment for construction.
So what can governments do to help?
Well, they can incentivize local sourcing and the development of new building technologies.
Okay.
Things like tax breaks for companies that use recycled materials or invest in domestic manufacturing. That's a good place to start. And streamlining those regulations and building codes, that can really help speed up the adoption of new materials and construction methods.
So it's like we need a Green New Deal for the construction industry, a push towards, sustainability and resilience.
I think that's a fair assessment. And industry groups, they have a crucial role to play as well, sharing those best practices, developing standards, and just making sure knowledge is being shared. The more the industry learns from each other, the better equipped they'll be to handle these challenges.
So it's about fostering that sense of shared responsibility and collaboration,
Exactly.
rather than just having each firm out there fending for themselves.
Right, exactly. And then financial institutions, they can contribute by providing financing for projects that are using these innovative approaches. And they can develop insurance products that specifically address those risks that are associated with, war trades and those volatile material prices.
So it's about getting everyone on the same page, aligning those financial incentives with those bigger goals of sustainability and resilience.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've laid out a pretty thorough roadmap here, but it seems like at the end of the day, it all comes down to the people on the ground, the ones actually doing the work, the builders, the architects, the developers. What advice would you give them, as they face this new reality?
Well, first and foremost, don't panic. The challenges are real, but there are also opportunities here. Just stay informed, be adaptable, and don't be afraid to try those new ideas and technologies.
So be agile, think outside the box, be willing to kind of challenge those old ways of doing things.
Exactly. And building those relationships with suppliers, your partners, industry experts, that's more important than ever in this interconnected world.
So collaboration is key.
It really is.
Okay, those are some great takeaways. It sounds like the construction industry is really kind of on the verge of a major transformation here.
I think so. I mean, the road ahead will have its bumps, that's for sure. But I'm optimistic that the industry will come out of this stronger and more resilient.
All right, that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot, from those global forces impacting construction costs to, strategies for navigating this new landscape. But we're not done yet. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into, this crazy world of construction costs and the impact of, as we've been calling it, war trades.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, from the supply chain disruptions to, the rise of all these innovative materials and strategies for building resilience.
And it seems like that connection between global events and, your local building project is only getting stronger. So let's zoom out a little bit, look at the bigger picture. What does the future hold for the construction industry in this increasingly turbulent world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but I do see some trends emerging that suggest a pretty significant shift toward more localized and regionalized construction markets.
So less reliance on those massive global supply chains that are so vulnerable to disruption. It seems like we're seeing that in other industries too.
Yeah, exactly. It's about creating those shorter, more resilient supply chains. Imagine like A future where communities are using timber from local forests, sustainably managed ones instead of shipping lumber across continents,
Right.
or using recycled materials from demolished buildings to create new structures in the same city.
It's almost like closing the loop, creating a more circular economy within the construction industry.
Mhm.
That sounds like a really positive step, both economically and environmentally.
Yeah, it does have that potential to create a model that's more sustainable and resilient. This shift toward localization, it could also give those local economies a boost, create new jobs, and maybe even give communities a sense of ownership over those building projects.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. So, what about technology? We talked about 3D printing and modular construction,
Mhm.
but are there other innovations, on the horizon that could help the industry adapt to all these global challenges?
For sure. One area that's really exciting is the use of artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning in construction planning and management.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're already seeing companies using AI to analyze huge amounts of data, from weather patterns and geopolitical events to commodity prices and even labor availability.
So, like AI project managers
Uh-huh, yeah, kind of.
that can predict those material price fluctuations and come up with like the most efficient construction schedules?
It's not as far out there as you might think.
Wow.
These systems, they can really help firms make better decisions about, when to buy materials, the best routes for shipments, and how to adjust those project timelines to, kind of soften the blow of any disruptions.
It's like having a crystal ball that can see those potential problems coming and then tell you how to fix them before they happen.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's incredible. But I imagine there are still challenges, right? I mean, even with all these advancements.
Oh, of course. Change is never easy, and the construction industry is no exception. There'll be pushback against new technology, regulatory hurdles, and a need to really invest in workforce training to make sure everyone's got the skills they need in this new landscape.
Right, so it's not just about building smarter buildings, it's about having a smarter workforce as well.
Exactly. We need to invest in training programs that give construction professionals those skills they'll need to work with these new technologies
Right?
and just adapt to this, rapidly changing environment. We need people who understand data analytics, people who can operate this advanced machinery and who can work, alongside robots on the job site.
Wow, that's a whole new era for construction, that's for sure. But I think even with all this change and uncertainty, it's important to remember that construction is, at its heart, about building things that improve people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's a school, a hospital, a bridge, or a home, these structures, they're the foundation of our communities. And the people who build them, they play such a vital role in everyone's well-being.
So as we look to the future, let's support those innovators, the problem solvers, and those builders who are out there working to create, a better world, a more resilient and sustainable world.
Yeah, definitely.
And let's stay curious, engaged, and informed about the forces that are shaping our built environment.
For sure.
Because as we've learned in this deep dive, even something as seemingly local as, the cost of building a house down the street,
Right.
it's all connected to this much wider world.
Here's something to think about. If the construction industry can adapt to all these global challenges, what other industries could learn from their example?
It's a great question to leave our listeners with. Some serious food for thought. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into construction cost in this, pretty turbulent world. We hope you found it insightful, thought-provoking, and maybe a little inspiring.
Absolutely.
As always, we encourage you to, keep exploring these topics, do your own research, and most importantly, stay engaged in the conversations that are shaping our future.
Yeah, great advice.
And be sure to subscribe to the Deep Dive so you don't miss out on any future episodes where we, explore other fascinating corners of our world. Until next time, keep diving deep.